Cynthia shows up unexpected at hotel lobby. John Lennon's reaction leaves security speechless. New York City, 1975. A concrete beast, roaring with ambition and shadowed by forgotten dreams. For John Lennon, it was both a sanctuary and a cage. He walked its streets, a phantom of his former self, a legend adrift in a sea of his own making. The city's relentless pulse mirrored the frantic beat of his own heart, a heart still scarred by battles fought and loves lost. He was here, in America, battling deportation, battling his own demons, battling the echoes of a past that refused to die. The air was thick with the scent of exhaust fumes, hot pretzels, and the unspoken stories of millions. For John, every corner held a memory, every siren a lament. He had sought refuge in this sprawling metropolis, a place where he could reinvent himself, shed the skin of the beetle, the prophet, the revolutionary. But the past, like a relentless shadow, clung to him, especially the ghost of a life he had left behind across the ocean. He lived in the opulent Dakota building, a fortress against the world, yet even its thick walls could not keep out the specters. His days were a blur of creative bursts, legal battles, and the relentless demands of a fame that had become both a blessing and a curse. He was a man perpetually on the run, from the media, from the government, and most profoundly from himself. But there was one ghost, more persistent, more poignant than any other, that haunted the quiet corners of his mind. Cynthia, his first wife, the girl from Liverpool, the mother of his first son, Julian. She represented a life of innocence, of beginnings, a world before the madness, before Yoko, before the global phenomenon. A world he had irrevocably shattered. The public narrative was simple. John left Cynthia for Yoko, a clean break. But the truth, as always, was a tangled, bleeding mess. A story of ambition, of youth, of a man consumed by a destiny he couldn't comprehend, leaving wreckage in his wake. For years, he had avoided her, the pain of their shared history too raw, too inconvenient. He had built new walls, new lives, new narratives. But some foundations, once cracked, never truly heal. He believed he had buried that past, sealed it away in the annals of rock and roll history. But the universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. It was a cold, blustery afternoon in late autumn. John was scheduled for a rare public appearance at a high-profile charity event, necessitating a brief stay at a luxury hotel in Midtown. A temporary displacement from his Dakota sanctuary. A moment of vulnerability. He was in the lobby, surrounded by his usual entourage of security, assistants, and the ever-present hum of expectation. The grand marble-floored space, usually a stage for the city's elite, was about to become the setting for a different kind of drama. A collision of past and present, of myth and raw human truth. A truth that would unravel in the most unexpected, most public of ways. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen tension, a silent countdown to a confrontation that would peel back the layers of the legend and reveal the man beneath, still haunted, still searching for absolution. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. John Lennon in the mid-1970s was a paradox wrapped in an enigma. His public image was one of a defiant rebel, a peace activist, a musical genius. But behind the dark glasses and the carefully cultivated aloofness, he was a man teetering on the edge of profound introspection, grappling with the immense weight of his own legacy. New York, with its ceaseless energy and anonymity, offered a strange kind of freedom, yet also amplified his internal struggles. His days were a labyrinth of creative pursuits and legal battles. He would spend hours in his home studio, chasing elusive melodies, wrestling with lyrics that sought to articulate the fractured spirit of the age. The music was often raw, confessional, a stark contrast to the polished anthems of his Beatle days. He was searching for a new voice, a new truth in the cacophony of his own fame. Yet the inspiration often felt forced, the words heavy with a cynicism that had replaced the youthful idealism. He was a man caught between worlds, the public icon, the private soul, the artist, the husband, the father, each pulling him in different directions. The weight of expectation was a physical burden, pressing down on his shoulders, twisting his thoughts into knots. The New York he inhabited was a stark contrast to the vibrant, hopeful city of the 1960s. The optimism had faded, replaced by economic strife, political unrest, and a pervasive sense of disillusionment. The dreams he had once sung about seemed to mock him from the headlines, from the faces of the disillusioned youth who still clung to his words, even as he struggled to believe them himself. He saw the hunger in their eyes, the desperate search for meaning, and it weighed heavily on him. He knew he was a symbol, a vessel for their hopes, but he often felt empty, a mere reflection of their desires. The city's towering skyscrapers seemed to mock his own towering ambitions, now often tinged with regret. His personal life was a tempest. The public gaze was relentless, dissecting every move, every relationship, every perceived misstep. The media, once his ally, now often portrayed him as a caricature, a fallen idol. He craved privacy, yet thrived on attention. He preached peace, yet often found himself embroiled in conflict, both external and internal. The contradictions were a constant companion, a shadow that followed him through the opulent rooms of the Dakota, through the bustling streets of Greenwich Village, and into the quiet solitude of his own mind. He was a man of paradoxes, a walking enigma even to himself, a prisoner in a golden cage of his own making. He sought solace in various forms: art, philosophy, even fleeting moments of anonymity in the city's less glamorous corners. He would sometimes wander through Central Park, a solitary figure in a long coat, observing the ordinary lives unfolding around him, a stark contrast to his own extraordinary yet often lonely existence. He carried the weight of a generation's expectations, the burden of a legacy that was both a blessing and a curse. He was a man who had dared to imagine a better world, and now he was forced to live in one that seemed determined to prove him wrong. The very air of New York, thick with history and unspoken stories, seemed to press in on him, demanding answers he didn't possess. The public saw the headlines, the controversies, the carefully crafted image. They saw the rock star, the icon. But behind the closed doors, in the quiet moments between the chaos, John Lennon was a man grappling with his own humanity, his own flaws, his own profound sense of responsibility. He was searching for something real, something true, in a world that constantly demanded artifice. He was an open wound, exposed to the world, yet desperately trying to heal, to find a new path, a new voice, in the cacophony of his own fame. The stage was set, not for a concert, but for a collision of worlds, a confrontation that would peel back the layers of myth and reveal the raw, beating heart beneath. A heart that, despite its fame, was as vulnerable and searching as any other in the vast, indifferent city. The grand lobby of the Plaza Hotel, a monument to old-world opulence, was a symphony of hushed conversations, clinking silverware, and the distant murmur of Fifth Avenue traffic. John Lennon, flanked by his security detail, moved through it like a king, albeit a reluctant one. He was there for a quick interview, a necessary evil in his ongoing public relations dance. His mind was already elsewhere, drifting towards a new melody, a half-formed lyric. Then, the world stopped. Across the vast, polished marble floor near the ornate gilded elevators, a figure stood. Elegant, poised, yet radiating a quiet determination that cut through the hotel's sophisticated hum. Her hair, a familiar shade of blonde, was styled with a timeless grace. Her eyes, though older, held a spark he knew intimately, a ghost from a lifetime ago. Cynthia. John's breath hitched. The casual chatter around him faded into an indistinct drone. His security detail, usually hyper-alert, seemed to freeze, sensing the sudden, profound shift in their charge's demeanor. Cynthia. Here, in New York, it was an impossibility, a breach of the unspoken rules of their separate existences. She was a chapter closed, a book sealed, yet here she was, turning the page with her mere presence. Her gaze met his across the expanse of the lobby. There was no anger, no accusation in her eyes, only a deep, unreadable sadness, and perhaps a flicker of something akin to curiosity. It was a look that pierced through the layers of fame, the years of separation, the carefully constructed defenses he had built around his heart. For a fleeting moment, he wasn't John Lennon, the icon. He was just John, the young man who had once loved her, the man who had broken her heart. The security guards, trained to anticipate threats, were utterly unprepared for this. This wasn't a crazed fan, a paparazzi ambush, or a political protester. This was something far more potent, far more dangerous to John Lennon's carefully maintained equilibrium. This was history, walking and breathing, demanding to be acknowledged. One of the guards, a burly man named Frank, stepped forward, his hand instinctively going to his earpiece. "Mr. Lennon, is everything all right?" he murmured, his voice laced with confusion. He had seen John handle hostile crowds, aggressive journalists, even physical threats with a detached coolness. But now, John was utterly still, his face a mask of shock and something akin to dread. John didn't answer. His eyes remained locked on Cynthia, who had now taken a tentative step forward. The distance between them felt like an ocean, yet the connection was undeniable, a thin, invisible thread stretching across years of silence and unspoken pain. The air in the opulent lobby grew heavy, charged with the weight of their shared past, a past that had just materialized, uninvited, in the heart of his present. The secret, it seemed, was not just the story of their separation, but the enduring, unacknowledged wound it had left on both their souls. The grand lobby, once a stage for casual elegance, now felt like an arena. Every hushed whisper, every clinking glass, amplified by the sudden profound silence that had fallen around John Lennon. His security detail, bewildered, formed a loose perimeter, their eyes darting between John and the woman who had materialized like a ghost from a forgotten dream. Cynthia. John took a slow, deliberate breath. The shock was giving way to a strange cocktail of emotions: regret, defensiveness, and an undeniable, unsettling curiosity. He hadn't seen her in years, not truly, only in photographs, in the periphery of news reports, always distant, always separate. Now, she was here, in the flesh, a living, breathing testament to a life he had discarded. Cynthia, too, seemed to gather herself. Her initial hesitation gave way to a quiet resolve. She wasn't here for a scene, not for a public spectacle. Her presence alone was enough. She simply stood, her gaze unwavering, allowing the weight of their shared history to settle between them. There was no need for words, not yet. The unspoken dialogue was deafening. "Mr. Lennon?" Frank, the head of security, tried again, his voice firmer this time, a hint of concern for John's uncharacteristic stillness. "Should we escort the lady out?" John finally broke his silence, his voice raspy, barely above a whisper. "No," he said, the single word cutting through the tension. "No, Frank, it's all right." He took a step forward, then another, slowly closing the distance between them. Each step felt like a journey across years, across continents, across the chasm of their broken marriage. As he approached, he saw the subtle changes in her face, the faint lines around her eyes, the quiet strength in her jaw. But he also saw the familiar vulnerability, the echo of the girl he had married in secret, the girl who had stood by him through the raw, hungry early days of the Beatles. The sight was a punch to the gut, stirring up a maelstrom of buried feelings. "Cynthia," he said, his voice barely audible, a name he hadn't spoken aloud in her presence for so long. It felt foreign on his tongue, yet achingly familiar. "John," she replied, her voice soft, steady, devoid of the bitterness he might have expected. I didn't expect to see you here." A slight, ironic smile touched her lips. "Though I suppose you're everywhere these days." The irony was not lost on him. He, the man who craved anonymity, was indeed everywhere. And she, the woman he had tried to erase from his public narrative, had just appeared in the most public of places. "What are you doing in New York?" he asked, the question feeling inadequate, almost absurd, given the circumstances. "Julian," she answered simply. "He's visiting. We thought a change of scenery. He wanted to see the city." Her eyes flickered, a subtle hint of the pain she still carried. "He talks about you, you know, still." The mention of Julian, their son, was a fresh wound. John had been a distant father, a fact that gnawed at him, but constant source of guilt. He had tried to reconnect, but the chasm felt too wide, too deep. Cynthia's words were not an accusation, but a quiet statement of fact, more powerful than any shouted complaint. The security detail watched, utterly perplexed. This wasn't a threat. This was something far more intimate, far more profound. They saw the raw emotion playing across John's face, a vulnerability they had never witnessed. The legend was cracking, revealing the man beneath, a man still haunted by the ghosts of his past, still wrestling with the consequences of his choices. The unspoken truth was that their history, however painful, was an indelible part of him, a shadow he could never truly outrun. The air in the plaza lobby thickened, not with tension, but with the palpable weight of shared history. John and Cynthia stood a few feet apart, the space between them a chasm of unspoken words, years of silence, and the ghosts of a love story that had ended in spectacular public fashion. The security detail, still hovering, watched with a mixture of confusion and a strange, almost voyeuristic fascination. This was not the John Lennon they knew. "Julian," John repeated, the name a fragile echo in the grand hall. He felt a pang of guilt, sharp and immediate. "I'm sorry, Cyn," he said, the words escaping him before he could censor them. It was a raw, unscripted apology, a confession of a pain he had carried for years, buried deep beneath layers of bravado and artistic angst. For everything, for the way it ended, for the hurt. The apology hung in the air, a fragile offering. Cynthia's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise. She hadn't expected it, not after all these years. She had long ago stopped hoping for it. "It was a long time ago, John," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But some scars, they don't fade, do they?" She met his gaze, and in her eyes he saw the reflection of his own unhealed wounds. The betrayal, the public humiliation, the quiet struggle to raise their son in the shadow of a global phenomenon. He nodded slowly, a profound sadness settling over his features. "No," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "They don't." He took another step closer, an almost imperceptible movement. I made a mess of things, didn't I?" Cynthia simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. She didn't need to confirm it. The truth was etched on both their faces, in the lines of their lives, in the very air between them. The secret, John realized, was not a hidden truth about his past actions, but the enduring, unacknowledged pain he had inflicted and the profound human cost of his relentless pursuit of a different life. In that quiet, opulent lobby, the legend of John Lennon was momentarily stripped away, revealing a man still grappling with the profound human consequences of his own choices. The confession hung in the air, a fragile bridge built between two souls on the precipice of understanding. John's apology, raw and unexpected, had pierced through Cynthia's carefully constructed defenses, revealing the lingering vulnerability beneath her stoic exterior. The security detail, still maintaining their silent vigil, exchanged uneasy glances. This was far beyond their mandate, a deeply personal drama unfolding in the most public of stages. "A mess," Cynthia finally said, her voice soft, almost reflective. "Yes, John, a spectacular mess. But we all make them, don't we? Especially when we're young and chasing something we don't quite understand." There was no bitterness in her tone, only a weary acceptance, a wisdom born of years of quiet suffering and resilience. John looked at her, truly seeing her, perhaps for the first time in decades. He saw the woman who had loved him unconditionally, who had endured the chaos of his early fame, who had given him a son. He saw the quiet strength that had allowed her to navigate the wreckage of their marriage and emerge, not broken, but profoundly changed. The image of the wronged wife, the victim, began to recede, replaced by the reality of a strong, independent woman. "I never meant to hurt you, Cyn," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, the words heavy with a regret that had festered for years. I was lost, confused, chasing ghosts of my own." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of profound exhaustion. "The fame, it changes you. It twists everything, makes you believe your own hype. Makes you think you're invincible." Cynthia nodded slowly. "I know," she said. "I saw it happening. The world wanted a god, and you tried to be one. But you were just a boy, John. A brilliant, complicated, terrified boy." Her words were a profound act of empathy, a recognition of his own struggles, even amidst her own pain. It was a moment of unexpected grace. The conversation, once fraught with unspoken accusations, had transformed into a quiet reckoning. They spoke of Julian, of his budding artistic talents, of his quiet nature. John listened intently, absorbing every detail, a hunger in his eyes for the connection he had so carelessly severed. He asked about her life, her work, her journey since their separation, and Cynthia, surprisingly, answered, sharing glimpses of a life lived far from the spotlight, a life of quiet rebuilding. The minutes stretched, becoming an eternity in the bustling lobby. Other hotel guests, sensing the unusual intensity of the interaction, gave them a wide berth. The security guards, initially tense, had relaxed slightly, recognizing that this was a moment of profound human connection, not a threat. They were witnessing a raw, unscripted scene, a glimpse behind the curtain of the legend. "I should go," Cynthia said eventually, a faint sigh escaping her lips. "Julian will be wondering where I am." She looked at John, her eyes holding a complex mixture of emotions, lingering sadness, a touch of forgiveness, and a quiet understanding. "Take care of yourself, John." He reached out, almost instinctively, and gently touched her arm. It was a fleeting contact, a silent acknowledgement of the years, the pain, the shared history. "You too, Cyn," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And tell Julian. Tell him I'll call, soon, really." She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acceptance of his promise, however fragile. Then, with a final lingering glance, she turned and walked towards the elevators, her figure receding into the opulent distance. John watched her go, a profound sense of emptiness settling over him, mingled with a strange, unsettling peace. The confrontation had not brought closure, but it had unveiled the raw, unhealed wounds, and in doing so had opened a path, however faint, towards a different kind of understanding. The weight of their unfinished business, he realized, would always be a part of him, a silent song in the symphony of his life. The elevator doors chimed softly, swallowing Cynthia whole, leaving John Lennon standing alone in the vast, echoing lobby of the Plaza Hotel. The sudden absence of her presence was a physical void, a cold draft in the opulent space. His security detail, sensing the moment had passed, subtly tightened their formation around him, their professional masks back in place. John remained still for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the spot where she had stood. The noise of the lobby, once a distant hum, now seemed to rush back in, a jarring cacophony after the profound silence of their exchange. He felt exposed, raw, as if a vital layer of his carefully constructed persona had been peeled away. "Mr. Lennon," Frank, the head of security, ventured, his voice cautious. "Are you ready to proceed?" John slowly turned, his eyes still distant, unfocused. He looked at Frank, then at the other guards, as if seeing them for the first time. His relationship with his son was a constant ache, a wound he rarely allowed himself to probe. "How is he? Really?" Cynthia's gaze softened, a flicker of the old tenderness returning, quickly veiled by a practiced reserve. "He's growing up, John. He's a good boy, talented. He misses you." Her voice was steady, but a tremor ran through her hand as she unconsciously clutched her purse. "He asks why you don't call more often." The directness of her words, devoid of malice, was more devastating than any outburst. It was a quiet, undeniable indictment. John flinched, a visible wince that even his security guards noticed. He had always been adept at deflecting, at charming, at intellectualizing his way out of uncomfortable truths. But Cynthia, with her simple, unadorned honesty, cut through it all. I know," he mumbled, looking away, his eyes scanning the opulent details of the lobby, anywhere but her face. "It's complicated. The distance, the lawyers, everything." He knew they were hollow excuses, even as he uttered them. "Complicated," Cynthia echoed, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. "Yes, John, our lives always were, weren't they? Especially when you decided to make them public property." Her tone was not accusatory, but observational, a statement of fact that resonated with the profound injustice she had endured. He looked back at her, truly seeing her now, not just the ghost of his past, but a woman who had rebuilt her life, who had carried the burden of his fame and his abandonment with a quiet dignity. He saw the strength in her eyes, the resilience that had allowed her to survive the maelstrom he had created. And in that moment, a wave of profound regret washed over him. They were just men, doing their jobs, protecting the icon. But the man inside the icon was reeling, profoundly shaken by the unexpected encounter. "Proceed?" John murmured, a faint, almost bitter smile touching his lips. "Yes, Frank, always proceed." He took a deep breath, a visible effort to regain his composure, to redon the mantle of John Lennon, the rock star, the legend. He walked towards the hotel exit, the security detail forming a tight cordon around him. But as he moved, something was different. The usual swagger was replaced by a subtle, almost imperceptible hesitation. The cynicism in his eyes was still there, but now it was tinged with a profound melancholy, a quiet introspection that hadn't been there before. Outside, the New York streets were alive with their usual chaotic energy. Taxis honked, pedestrians hurried past, and the city lights blurred into a vibrant, indifferent tapestry. John stepped into the waiting limousine, the tinted windows offering a fragile shield from the outside world. As the car pulled away, he leaned back against the plush leather seats, closing his eyes. Cynthia's face, her quiet strength, her gentle words replayed in his mind. And Julian, The mention of his son was a constant, aching reminder of the life he had chosen to leave behind, the responsibilities he had neglected. He understood now, with a chilling clarity, that some wounds never truly heal. Some ghosts never truly disappear. They simply recede into the shadows, waiting for an unexpected moment to reappear, to demand their due. Cynthia's unexpected appearance was not just a chance encounter. It was a profound reckoning, a mirror held up to his own soul, reflecting the profound human cost of his choices. The encounter had not brought resolution, but it had brought a different kind of truth, a truth that was not about grand pronouncements or revolutionary anthems, but about the quiet, enduring pain of human connection, of love lost, of regret unaddressed. It was a truth that would echo in his mind, a silent, unwritten song, a constant reminder that even the most famous, most powerful voices are ultimately just human, flawed and vulnerable, forever bound by the threads of their past. He opened his eyes, staring out at the blurred lights of the city. The revolution he had once sung was in the streets, but he knew now, with a profound and unsettling certainty, that the most important revolutions, the most profound truths, were always found within, and sometimes they arrived unannounced in the most unexpected of places, carried by the quiet strength of a ghost from a forgotten past. The city roared around him, but in his mind, only a whisper remained, a haunting melody of what was lost and what could never truly be regained.